beyond. And I'm going to base this presentation on my experience working with games and building. Hi everyone, my name is Drussila and I'm here to talk about why soft skills matter from games to education and even beyond. And I'm going to base this presentation on my experience working with games and building a coding school called Hive Helsinki here in Finland. But first, let me introduce myself. I've been in the games industry for over 16 years, and my background is in game design and leadership from companies like Supercell, Wooga, and Rovio. I'm also Brazilian, but I've been in Finland for 15 years now. And for the last 8 of these years, I've been in Supercell as a game lead, where I worked on titles like Heyday and new game prototypes. But more recently, I took on a very different kind of project, which was building that Hive Helsinki coding school. And it is a big jump from games to education and a bit random, but there is a connection, I promise you. And those are the soft skills, as you can guess from the title of the presentation. So I'm going to be connecting those dots and tell you a bit about the story of why and how we kicked this off at Supercell, and tell you about how the school works, about soft skills and how students at Hive learn them, and a little bit about my personal journey and, of course, some conclusions. So, yeah, we decided to, I'm going to give you some background on Supercell. So we decided to build this new kind of coding school as an answer to some challenges that we have seen in our company and the tech industry. So, for example, one challenge is that there's a really high demand for highly skilled coders. And this demand is increasing by the thousands every year, and not just in our industry, but any industry that is touched by tech, which nowadays is practically all of them. But it is not just a quantity challenge, it's also quality. We don't just need coders, we need great coders that are well-rounded and creative problem solvers and that are able to work well in teams. And another challenge is that society has a very narrow view still of who coding is for. And due to stereotypes and misconceptions, many people who would have the talent for coding, they don't even try it. And here I'm showing like women because it's a very clear imbalance, but I do mean people of many different kinds of backgrounds. So for example, somebody who is more artistic might not consider coding because they don't realize that it's a creative tool. But yeah, anyways, and when you realize that there's no good reason for this, it can be really disappointing, and we are definitely missing out as an industry. What I mean by that is just, think of all the ideas not being had, think about the problems going unsolved, and all of that because perspectives and talent are not being tapped into. And, you also don't need to be a math genius to realize that by addressing this one, it can also help address the quantity problem that I mentioned earlier. And discussing all this in Supercell, we realized that to really have impact at scale, it wouldn't make sense, or there wouldn't be much that we could do to address this on a company level. And then it became very obvious that one way to look at it was via education. And that's when our CEO, Ilkka Pananen, heard about this revolutionary school in Paris called 42. And he visited it, and he was really inspired and very impressed with it. And indeed, like they did a lot of things very successfully there. And he asked me to go there. I did. I came back feeling the exact same way. And, he asked, do you want to lead this? And I, of course, said yes. And now you might be wondering, what is it that makes this school so special? Then please tell me more, and I will. So this pioneering model, it's a very different kind of school from the ways that the students are selected to the way that they learn coding. First of all, there are no teachers, no classes, and no books. Students learn by doing and collaborating with each other, and it's called peer-to-peer and project-based learning. They work on projects solving problems of increasing complexity, and while seeking knowledge by themselves and sharing with one another, which is exactly how it works in real life. It's very relatable to us in Supercell, a company that values independence, responsibility, and teamwork. But to me, the most beautiful thing about the school is that anyone can apply regardless of experience level, degrees, age, or any arbitrary criteria. And the tuition is also free. So to make sure that anybody with talent really has a shot. So if they're interested, they have to apply through an online game. But the real test of the school is the so-called piscine. That's, by the way, me there in our first piscine at Hive last year. So to enter the school, you have to go through this 1 month of intense training. And piscine means swimming pool in French. And it's called that way because people are thrown in the deep end. And that means that from day one, they get hands-on assignments and very little instructions. So, and it also doesn't really matter if you have experience coding before or not. It's just hard for everybody. Everybody's on the same boat. And yeah, at the end, only the ones that can swim will do well and be admitted as Hive students, if you're in 42 students. So, yeah, and another interesting thing is that they have a gamified curriculum that is inspired by RPG games. So you're looking at it. It's a graph. Those circles are projects. And every project completed earns experience points and unlocks the next project until the path starts to branch out. And students are free to explore many different paths in computer science and master different skills. And also, going through this program, it lasts an average of 3 years of full-time dedication. So you do get, like, on a really deep level, computer science, really deep level with computer science. And because of this, as a result, the students in Paris who go through this program, they are in really high demand, and they are prepared to enter the workforce seamlessly. And some of them have gone to companies like Facebook and Google. And at the time, nearly 100% of the graduates left the school well employed. The majority had job offers before graduating, and many of them built their own companies. But what I found the most interesting is that 50% of 42 students had never coded before. They might have come from different studies like design, philosophy, finance, or even health. Some may have been waiters, bartenders, hairdressers, magicians, but none of that mattered. What they had in common was the desire to learn soft skills that they either had or developed along the way, and just a lot of drive and persistence, which are the actual teachers in the school. And while many people would think that these different backgrounds would be a disadvantage, in reality, it was quite the opposite. It's proven, diversity results in creative solutions and innovation. And you could see at the school, and I can already see at Hive now that it is indeed true. Like, you can see through their projects how inspired they are, and how their background really matters. And and we heard that this concept from 42 had been done in other countries as well, but nobody had done it in the Nordics, and we thought that we absolutely had to have this in Finland. And it wasn't hard to get partner companies and government support, which was just the validation that we needed. It showed that the appetite for something like this extended through our educational field and through our industry. So from when we kicked off in November 2017, it took less than 2 years for Hive to open. And this is a photo of, like, the first batch of swimmers signing up. So yeah, these are other photos from Hive. It's a very colorful school, as you can see. We wanted it to be more like a mix of second home and cozy with design school and a place where you can come to be yourself and be creative and think outside of the box. But yeah, now that you know the background behind Hive, I'd like to tell you to focus this presentation on the topic of soft skills and the importance of soft skills. And why? Because at the beginning of the project, I thought that this was primarily a coding school that as a bonus develops some soft skills on the students. But in reality, it's almost the other way around in a way. We used to joke that this is actually a life school and that coding is the cherry on top. But yeah, so you will, and I think you will understand why when I continue to go into this. So, okay, let's start with what are soft skills. Let's not assume that everybody knows. So, soft skills are non-technical skills that relate to how you work. Usually people tend to think that it's just communication and interpersonal skills, but it does include other things like how you solve problems, how you manage your work, and they are skills that enable you to navigate your environment, work well with others, perform well, and achieve your goals with complementing hard skills. For this presentation, I decided to focus on 4 very key soft skills that the students practice relentlessly at the school and which I think will pay them dividends for life. And in my opinion, these are the skills that combined will allow anyone as an individual and collectively as a team or company to do anything that you set your mind to. So first up, let's talk about problem solving. My favorite. A problem exists. You know what a problem is. It exists when you have a goal and you don't know how to achieve it. And I would be willing to bet that this happens regularly for any of us at work and in life. And so what problem solving is essentially is the process of finding solutions to complex issues. And that process usually involves identifying and defining the problem, mapping out alternative solutions and trying them until you get the result that you want. And without it, simply put, you will often find yourself stuck. You will be unable to tackle things outside of what you already know. And if you intend to keep learning and adapting into a rapidly changing world, you need it. And if you think about game development, it is basically problem solving all the time. Whether it's art, design, it doesn't, or code, it doesn't matter the discipline. Repeating the same solutions from the past will take you nowhere. There are no formulas. And in Hive, how the students practice this is that the assignments, they are actually designed specifically as problem-solving challenges. They are not simply coding tasks that tell you to, code something specific with a specific coding language. You're usually presented with something that you have to first understand. You need to identify the actual problem, which is often obvious, and then you have to look for the theory and the tools you need to solve that problem yourself and with your peers. This process can be very hard, but it can be also very motivating and rewarding. So many students have reported that, it feels almost addictive to learn that way, because when they solve a problem, they see that they can do a lot more than they gave themselves credit for. And the more you practice, the more you start to understand that it is a process. You just have to be patient and follow those steps. And then we have teamwork, which is the collaborative effort of a group to achieve a common goal. And it includes a bunch of social and people skills in there. Everything goes in the back: communication, collaboration, listening, empathy, conflict management, trust building, and a lot of that stuff. And it is important because in the real world, complex issues are rarely solved alone. And in fact, teams nowadays are quite multidisciplinary, and they're often made of people of different backgrounds, different levels of experience, personalities, ideas, ways of working. And for example, in Supercell, we used to say that the best games games are made by the best people, and we don't do that anymore. We say the best teams make the best games, because being the best person doesn't necessarily mean that you can deliver results in a group. The group has to work well together. And I honestly believe that we are headed into a future that is getting more diverse, and the further we go, the harder it's going to be to get away with not being inclusive, I think. And the teams who don't focus on these skills will start to stay behind. And so, yeah, I do think it's going to become increasingly important to be open-minded, develop collaboration skills and empathy if you're going to be honing talent in the next generations for your team. So how this is practiced at Hive, from the beginning, the projects are not easy and there are no teachers. So you immediately feel the need to start brainstorming with the people around you. And then comes a very key feature of this model, which is the peer evaluation. So when you finish a project, the system pairs you up with another student, and they have to evaluate your project based on instructions. And then after they do that, you get to evaluate their feedback on you, which is very interesting, but also not very easy. It's not easy to walk somebody through your thought process unless you're a good communicator. So you practice that a lot. And sometimes the person evaluating you will be a newbie. And that happened with me when I was there in Paris for 1 week trying a piscine because I wanted to see how it works. And the first time I had to evaluate someone, and I was way behind. I'm not a coder. It was really hard for me. I was way behind, and I was paired with somebody way more advanced. And I was like, oh, this must be a bug. Like, how can I evaluate this person? And I asked the staff, and they said that, no, it's there for a reason. It's also important for these students to have to explain their work to people at a lower level. Because not only practices communication, but also they learn by teaching, which to me made a ton of sense. And finally, as the students progress in the studies, they start to have projects in teams. It starts small from 2 to 3 people, but at some point they are doing projects with 7 to 8 people. And, and the system also makes sure that you're as weak as your weakest link. Either everybody succeeds or everybody fails. So yeah, it's very interesting. And some people really do embrace and thrive in this model, but it can be very hard for some people as well. And not everyone is so open and don't want to interact with others. So those people, they're not going to do well in the school. After that, I'd like to touch on independence. Here's just one quote that I liked that says, independence isn't doing your own thing, it's doing the right thing on your own. Just to clarify that independence doesn't mean like running around doing whatever you want. So I'm going ahead and assume that, no one here enjoys micromanaging. And, I was just talking about how important teamwork is. Imagine being in a team where people are micromanaging you, or that you feel like you have to carry others, and that that never helps a team achieve their goals. And it's going to be the exact opposite. Each team member needs to take the initiative to fulfill their responsibilities, and the smaller the team, the more this gets magnified. Like, for example, in Supercell. And some skills that go into this bag that are very important are, for example, self-motivation, self-organizing, prioritization, time management, etc. And yeah, those are also all things that are not maybe that easy at first, but you can hone. And this can also be extended to independent thinking, which can be both logical and creative. When you obtain information and process it in your own way, rather than simply adopting the thoughts of others, you will be more likely to get new insights and original ideas. And, you know, I think this is very straightforward how students learn at Hive when there is no teacher or authority figures in that way to tell you what to do. There is no option but to be independent. From day one, you have to be responsible for your own progress, and you have to find the motivation to do that from within yourself. And also at Hive, there are no schedules or timetables, and the school is open 24/7. So that means that the students get to organize, just self-organize with themselves and their teams. And finally, the last soft skill I want to talk about is resilience. So this is a tweet from a Hive student during the piscine. She says, "The good news is I love this. The bad news is I'm bad at it. The great news is I can get better. And the fantastic news is I plan to." And she had no experience with coding before. She joined Hive, and I've just recently heard that she's in an internship in a great company here in Finland, so great for her. But yeah, this for me is the essence of resilience, which basically means the ability to navigate through adversity. And this is important because the line to success is never straight. And, you know, if you're trying to do new things, to solve new problems and innovate, you will always fail a lot. Like, there's no way around it. But if you can accept that failure as part of the process and learn from it and push through to your next attempt with optimism, that's the fuel that's going to allow you to keep trying and to keep problem solving until you get where you need to be. In Supercell, for example, we do kill more games than we release, and you know, there's a very positive attitude about it, and with the learnings, it actually does motivate developers to keep trying, and eventually that does lead to great success. And in Hive, how the students get this is it's through the whole program, but you know, the selection piscine is basically the ultimate resilience test, because if you don't swim, you sink. You will try and fail repeatedly from day one, and it is part of the learning process, and it's going to build stamina, determination, and many other skills that are necessary to succeed. And this also lasts for 30 days, so it can be physically exhausting too. And yeah, it can be maybe a little tough in the beginning, a little disheartening even at times. But by the end of the piscine, the applicants are often really proud of even their failures, because from each one of them, they learn a lot. And I honestly believe that embracing failure can actually be really liberating, because when that happens, you become wiser, you become bolder, and you become more willing to take risks. So now I talked about these 4 soft skills: problem solving, teamwork, independence, and resilience. And when you hone all of these, what you're essentially doing is, you're learning how to learn. And in Hive, students learn code, yes, but coding languages and technology change all the time. The most important thing they're learning is how to acquire new skills and knowledge in their lifetime. And just like in 42, Hive also, almost 50% of the students never coded before. So it wasn't their hard skills that allowed them to learn coding at a ridiculously fast pace. It was their soft skills that enabled them to go outside of their comfort zone, embrace their individual learning process, and receive support from their peers. And I'm very confident that these people, whatever they choose in life, they will succeed. And now finally, as we are getting closer to the end, I'd like to maybe just offer a few notes on my personal journey with this. By the end of this project, a lot of people ask me, how did I manage? I'm a game designer or a game developer, but I'm not a coder. I have no background in education. I'm not a Finn. I do not speak Finnish. And first, I would say, I don't know, because I really didn't. But after some reflection, I realized that what allowed me to achieve this was the very soft skills that we were advocating for the students. And basically, the whole school project was almost like 2-year scene for me. And, for example, problem solving, build school was this big problem, which I had to break down into smaller problems, just like we do with games. Like I used actually the experience from games for that. It's a project. It's like a product in a way. You have the idea and you start defining the edges and you start filling in the blanks. And that's exactly how I did it, breaking bigger problems into smaller problems. I just started. My first step was getting information from other schools. I just did a bunch of research, asked a bunch of questions, and started breaking down build school into, okay, there's the infrastructure, there is the team, and there is communications. There is all these components, and then each one of them I was breaking down further. And at some point, because it is a process, problem solving is a process, it started to come a second nature, and and then you start getting momentum. And then all of a sudden, it's not as overwhelming as it is in the beginning. And I couldn't have done this with the support of a bunch of people. So teamwork was definitely important there, and collaboration. I think for me, Hive was also a major exercise into dealing with all kinds of different people and being resourceful with my network and just asking help. I didn't know anything about building schools, so I couldn't get precious about asking people help. And I just started asking myself, who knows this? Who knows about construction? Who knows about marketing? Who knows about government policy? And running after these people. And many of them in Supercell, many of them outside Supercell. And it was a massive effort. It was a massive collective effort, including people from the community and other companies and the Ministry of Education. Many people were involved in this. And independence, it was, even with this help example, it's like people wouldn't help me if I wouldn't ask for help. So I still needed to identify my needs, where I need help, and go out of my way to get that to happen, to get that help that I need. And that's just one thing. I don't think I was ever told anything in this project in very good Supercell fashion. But what that also means is, and now I'm going just closing on the resilience part, is that I made many mistakes, some really big ones, and sometimes things out of my control also happened. But, I just kept trying to tell myself that, it's something new, so not knowing is a part of it, period. And because not knowing is a part of it, mistakes will happen. It's not about not making mistakes. You will make them, but just don't beat yourself and make sure that you learn and act fast. And the stuff that you can't control, don't sweat it. Just do your best at trying to overcome them. And I think some of this resilience did come from killing games at Supercell, because I do remember my first game that I killed many years ago. I did think that the world was going to end. But nothing happened. I survived, and I actually got a bunch of learnings I still use today. And I think that everybody needs at least one of those really big hits to start getting a bit more relaxed around this, around failing. But yeah, and now for some quick conclusions. I think soft skills are actually really hard. I don't know what's up with that name, but I do like to think of them more as future-proof skills, because what you do with them is actually learn how to learn other skills, including the hard ones, the so-called hard ones. And they are your toolkit to solve the problems of tomorrow. I think that they are going to have a greater importance as the workplaces are getting more diverse. We didn't discuss this, but I also think it's important to note that they're the hardest to be automated. And yes, they should be at the core of education, not just coding, and a priority in companies that want to last. And if this was not convincing enough, I have a photo for you, which I think you guys will recognize. It's the first photo of the black hole. And it was actually the interesting thing about this photo for me is that it was deemed as impossible. But after a decade of work of a huge team, this has been accomplished recently. And here's a quote from the lead of that project. It's a very long quote, but basically what she's saying is that no algorithm or person made this image. It required the amazing talent of a team of scientists from around the globe and years of hard work to develop everything that they needed to pull this off. And something that just makes me think about is, this is a great example of collective and creative problem solving. And it shows how far you can go when you manage to hone soft skills alongside hard skills. And what this makes me think is that, we're doing great as an industry, but imagine just how much further we can go with soft skills. What I ask myself is, what would be the equivalent of this black hole picture in our industry or in education or in the tech field as a whole? And I don't have these answers now, but it is something that I just wanted to throw out there to spark some thoughts. And for now, thank you, and I'm happy to answer other questions. Thank you.
So we have this sort of nicely. Okay. And we are live.
Hello.
Let's see. Yes, we are. Thank you, Drussila, so much for your talk and really inspiring various parts of not just game development, but also educational side. It was really, really impressive to hear about the way how Hive is operating and the whole idea of not having this sort of like peers, teachers, or someone to actually push you around, like in a way, which is very much open, kind of like mind blowing when you think about the more traditional education that, well, most of us, at least in our generations, went through. I don't know how about your schooling was, but at least I had very little to choose from when you think about it. It was just like, you do this and this and this, and then you achieve whatever you kind of put yourself a goal, or maybe someone else did. So for those who wish to ask any questions or comments, please do so either in the Twitch stream or in our Discord channel. So also for later, the discussions will continue in Discord, and Drussila will be available also to answer these, depending on the time zones also where you guys are. But yeah, let's continue on the topic. So today, the hot topic of the day at the end was about the soft skills. So it was really good to see that pretty much every single speaker actually had a quite big point on the soft skills. And when it comes to the teamwork and especially from your experience, do you have any? I mean, you already had a whole talk about it, but anything really hands-on, like some really practical advice in like what would be maybe the tools to use, either as a team lead or any kind of like to improve this type of practices. We heard from Camilla previously the tools that she's using, for example, for game design. But in your case, with like leading the team, any kind of practical kind of tools or practices that you have had to, or use something from the best practices that you wish to share?
That's a really good question. I don't know, like, if I can say that, they're surefire, like, because a lot of it you kind of learn as you go, as well. What I do think, I think on an individual level, something that I think people don't realize is that soft skills, they can be honed, and, you can practice it. So, I never realized, for example, that there are actual, whether you know it or not, when you're doing it, there are processes, mental processes that you are following. Like, for example, in the presentation, I mentioned the problem solving, that, step number 1, define the problem. Step number 2, like, so that kind of applies to a lot of things. And, but when it comes like to the team, first of all, I think it's very important for the leader for the lead to actually really care about this and see the value and try to understand it, because I do notice that it's very common for people to see it like, okay, it is important, so we need it, but they don't really like understand why. But then, so I think a process of self-reflection is really good for the lead to understand like why they want to do it and the value, and involve the team in that self-reflection as well, and have them also be a part of the solution. Because I think people sometimes, they go straight to trainings, like, all right, let's do inclusion training, this kind of training, against bias, and like all that stuff. But if the team doesn't quite understand why that's needed, and don't see the applications, it's going to enter one ear and leave the other. And I think that's very common. So if the lead actually really thinks that that's important, they should advocate for it. And they should have discussions with the team, like, where do you guys think we could improve? And is there something that you have noticed that you think the team could benefit more if you were better at this or that? And then like start thinking about maybe some trainings and workshops, and always also thinking of the practical scenarios, that how are you going to apply that, and sort of check in regularly later as well, not just like do one training and then leave it at that.
Absolutely. And actually now when you mentioned that, sort of like, especially from the leader's perspective, that what also happens, like, yeah, we need this, and then we kind of have it on the paper. And then even if we ask for the team members, meaning that some leaders ask for team members, but basically even whatever that, let's say, answers they receive from feedback or whatever kind of how they do it kind of like, yeah, but it doesn't really take action. So this is another thing that also today in throughout the day we also talked about, that actually how much listening is super important here, because you have to really listen the others, not just saying that you do, like comes from one ear and exits another, but this sort of like really listening what people need, what people want, and then how to adjust all that it works for most, because of course there will be always something that it's not ideal, but again it's the way how you together find a solution again that would fit the most and be the most beneficial for the team, for the product, for the company, and so on, because at the end of the day we do run businesses.
I think
we feed our families, so
yeah, on the listening is very important. And yeah, this is a very good point. I think, for example, in teams, feedback, being able to give and receive feedback is super important. And I find that it's surprisingly difficult for a lot of people in a lot of teams to practice that. So I think that is one thing, like one low-hanging fruit that, a lead can kind of check with their team, like, is there open communication, and do people feel comfortable in giving feedback, and do they give constructive feedback, and are people, like, do they also receive it? And because that's how we grow together, that's how we kind of also learn about each other and ourselves. So people should see it as an opportunity for learning and growth, and not like, like putting somebody down. Like it's if you do it well, it's constructive, and it brings people together as well.
Absolutely. And also I think when you talk about this is also asking for help, in a sense that, or knowing your limits, which is not something that it's bad thing. On contrary, like at least with my team, this is also like, it's not about like just say, like if something is too much or something is not feeling right already, because again, that is the communication part, that it's not about, if knowing your limits is also very important, and also what your strengths are, what are not. So basically that you do communicate, that you know how to work together, especially as a team, as you said. So that's also, it's because usually when you think about, when people ask for feedback, they are like afraid of this sort of negative feedback, but it's negative feedback is not the attack personally or somehow failure, but this is something that I think it's really important. And nowadays we are obviously through these trainings having more and more this type of content, that it's okay to, you know, share also your, in a way, weaknesses, in order to know what is the best way that works for you, that would be the most beneficial for the team, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think, like, as a lead, for example, I believe a lot in the leading by example. Like, there is a lot of people sometimes that, you know, they think that it's so easy to just tell people and then they will just know. But then, for example, with feedback, it can be uncomfortable to receive feedback. So I constantly ask it myself, because in a way it shows people that there's nothing weird about it. You know, like, I just want to improve. I just want to have more like self-awareness, like, you know, work on that. And, you know, and when somebody gives me feedback, I'm happy, and I show that I'm happy and I appreciate it. And I think when you start doing that yourself, it does make people more in your team more comfortable as well to receive feedback.
Absolutely, absolutely, and same thing goes with this sort of, like, as you said, improving oneself. Because if you we constantly work and improve and learn new skills, including this, learning about ourselves. Like, again, as we also grow older, there are certain stuff that you know, like, can we still do the, or, you know, and it's a different mindset that we are having constantly. Yet also we know how fast our, I mean, gaming industry shapes up and how things go. So it's really also important to be able to adapt and really, you know, see how you also as a person, because at the end of the day, we are all humans. We make mistakes, and that's fine.
Yes,
like, it's fine.
exactly.
So again, how to do it so that we can again get the most out of the thing together as a team. Let's see if there are any questions. Um, uh, how many people were in the team that made Hive possible? Would it be possible to create a similar school in other cities than Helsinki, since being present in probably really important? And how is the Hive handling working from home?
Well, those are like many questions, but yeah, let's start. The first one, the size of the team. So the building part of it, of the school, for maybe a year and a half or a bit less than that, it was actually like me driving the project, and I was like tapping into my network within Supercell and people outside, like whenever I needed help. But I was like alone for a very long time. It was more like, you know, looking for the building and getting information. How many computers do we need? Is the admissions process like? What do I need for that stuff? And in preparing for the launch as well, in Slush and all these things. But then towards the end, I did start to like build a team, and I got 3 people who were working in similar schools around the world, and relocated them to Finland. They came from France and Ukraine. And then I got like other people, and in the end, like operationally, Hive has a team of like 5 to 6 people. Yeah, I don't remember exactly now because I think somebody just joined, but it takes 5 to 6 people. So it was a very small team, but a very small team that was supported by a machine in the back, you know, like
Yes.
the financial resources and the knowledge. So for example, if sometimes we had asks questions about IT, I had the IT guys from Supercell to ask, and you know, so that helped for sure a lot. And then what was the other question?
So how is
if it
it
could be.
so the second question, like, so yeah, the continuation of that, are there any plans to maybe expand these schools like outside of Helsinki, maybe the rest of Finland or abroad? Like, are there any thoughts because of the success of Hive itself as it is?
Yeah, so 42, the Paris school, which we are based on, we are actually licensing their content. So we are a different school that uses their content and their tools. And So basically, there is a network of schools around the world already that is connected to 42 and doing the same. So we have sister schools, but we are independent, but we have that in common. But when it comes to Finland, I think for the first few years, we do own in Supercell the license for Finland for the school. And the thinking about for expansion was based on, let's see the results first. Like we believe in moving like slow and careful sometimes. Like, it's not, focus is good. So for example, we still would like to see how the students they place in internships, how well they do in internships after they graduate. Do they really get these great jobs in the industry? Like, are our results very similar to the other schools around the world? So first we want to like understand better, like how well this is really working in Finland, and if it's showing like a lot of promise, like in the longer run, then for sure I think it's going to be a no-brainer to do it in other locations as well, because the demand has actually been really high. Like there are so many applications, and because the school, like I explained, there is no tuition fee, there is no requirement really only other than like passing the swimming pool. So there are so many applications to the swimming pool part that it has become a lottery to get people in, because there's no other way to filter them. Everything would be arbitrary. So we do think that, oh my God, all these people that want to learn coding and want a shot at this. But let's wait a little bit more until we know how it works. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, then the question was about, as now COVID hit, and
the COVID,
working in distance. So how was it with the Hive?
Actually, it was very difficult this year for Hive because the school, actually this month, the school turns 1 year, if you count when the official studies started, not the swimming pool. So the students have been there for a year, and, it's a very young school. So, COVID did set a lot of people back in their progress, because the school was closed, and the peer-to-peer, it really shines when you are at the school. Like, the whole system is designed for you to be present at the computers, mingling, discussing, and when everybody went home, it was not a very good situation, and that affected 42 and all these types of schools around the world. So everybody from the network started discussing what can we do, and then what the Hive team did was just trying to come up with like events and challenges and things that could engage people at home, the students at home. But it was difficult, and it has slowed down their progress. A lot of people were not motivated at home for obvious reasons. Like, I think most people have had a drop in motivation. But I do think that here is where the resilience and the problem-solving part pays off. The team of Hive, they actually really they were freaking out at first, but then they were like, okay, we cannot change the situation. Like, this is outside of our control. So let's not waste too much energy about this. But then what can we actually do, thinking about the future? And then they started thinking that, what if we build these kind of tools, or what if we would change the system so that it would allow people to do better work remote, and involving the students into that process. Like, what do you guys need? And it could actually impact the future of the school, in the sense that it might be that it will work as a hybrid in the future. Like, when things are back to normal, maybe some of the things that they came up with now might be useful later. So I really appreciate that positive attitude.
Yes. And that sounds really, really fantastic, because as also, I can tell from my experience, I'm teaching at university. So this sort of twist obviously had to be made, but it's but it was also this is the now new normal, whatever this is. So definitely the hybrid is something that will, I think, remain in our industry, if nothing else. The schooling, but the industry itself, that it will definitely be more present. But it's nice, of course, if we can go back to live in-person interaction. Would be really, really nice. But so let's see, are there any? I don't see any other questions, at least not at this point. So for those who want to ask or some questions come later, please put your questions and comments to Discord. So we will get back to it, and especially Drussila will be answering as she sees. But so yeah, Drussila, I don't want to take any more of your time. Thank you so much for being with us.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. And congratulations, like this has been a great event.
Thank you. Well, all the participants make this event. We are just putting, like links in the right places. But yes, everything has been like really, and I'm really grateful for all the also partnership with Supercell and Camila and you joining us today as speakers. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you and have a great weekend, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Bye.
Bye-bye.